Rabbi YY Jacobson, a big pleasure to talk to you. Apart from being a world renowned speaker and educator and mechanech, you also have a wealth of experience in very real day-to-day issues that people face. I had the pleasure of interviewing you last
Thank
year,
you.
and obviously at the time we were coming out of Corona and some of the surrounding issues at that time. But this year our focus is on an issue that we feel very, very, very much permeates the world that we live in, particularly among the world of young people, but it's not confined to that only. And of course, is the world of bullying, and something that you've definitely, I understand, been very involved with frontline work. Um, so if we could talk a little bit, and really want to hear your take on the various substructures or ways in which bullying is expressed. If we could just define it, when we say bullying, we often have maybe a traditional understandings of the big kids beating up the little kid. Um, I think it means so much more nowadays. So if you could just elaborate a little bit how you see it, what is bullying?
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that, when we talk about bullying, we always have to see it not just from the perspective of the adults, the principals, the teachers, the educators, the therapists, the social workers, but most importantly, from the perspective of the children. Whenever a child feels and experiences a sense that they're not safe, they're not seen, they're not heard, they're not accepted, they can't be present, they can't show up to life in the classroom or in the home, there is something that is eating up at them in a very real, visceral, and emotional way. And they may not be processing all of it the way we can process it as adults. They're not telling themselves the messages we would want them to tell themselves. What they may be telling themselves is the message of, I'm unworthy, I'm damaged goods, I could never be safe in this world, nobody likes me, there's nothing to like, I don't deserve anything, I can never ask for something. When they become busy coping with just survival, their coping mechanisms are now on full alert. To use, maybe neuroscientific language, their amygdala, their reptilian brains are firing away, the neurons, just trying to survive. Like if somebody's being attacked by a tiger or a lion or a cheetah, or God forbid, somebody caught in a dangerous situation, and the alarm system, and there's a fire in the house, and the alarm system is blasting away, and that's what's happening in their brains. Can't shut that down so fast. And the effects of that 20 years later can be extremely dramatic. So if I would have to be asked to define what bullying is, and I'm not giving this answer from a scientific point of view, I'm giving more, it's more, I guess I would say, anecdotal more, just from experience and dealing with it and listening to people and hearing people's stories, when they're adults, 30-year-old, 50-year-old, I would say, any experience that happens in the classroom where a child ultimately feels unsafe, unwanted, I am a burden to society, I am a burden to my school, I am damaged goods, I'm really ruined, I don't deserve to be, there's something about me that is despicable, that is weird, that is ugly, that is grotesque. Any one of those feelings deep down that register in the brain on some level and create impaired self-beliefs are something that we as adults, as parents and educators have to tackle with the utmost sensitivity and severity.
So if I understand what you're saying, that whereas we may have thought once upon a time bullying as somebody, perpetuated bullying onto someone else, bullying is just a reality. It doesn't necessarily have to be intentionally perpetuated by anyone. The feeling of being unworthy, the feeling of being, that fear almost of being unworthy, it's a reality to be
I'm a
bullied.
failure, and every day that I show up here is causing me crazy pain. And this creates what we call today developmental trauma that can have lifelong effects if we as adults don't even know how to process it. And we grow up and then we try to enter into long-term relationships with our spouses, with our children. And these profound traumatic wounds show up all over the place. So we have to realize the consequence. Now, of course, there is bullying in the classical sense when children, mobilize to gang up on a child, beating him, teasing him or her, making fun of his weight, making fun of the way he speaks, making fun of his nose, making fun of the way he does, the way he plays, the way he teaches, the way he answers. That's, the obvious physical bullying, emotional bullying, verbal bullying. And here too, we have to be so sensitive to what the child is experiencing and never, ever just dismiss it and say, it's nothing, they'll all grow up. Of course they'll grow up. They'll grow up with wounds.
Right. And you did say examples of the classroom and school, but I guess, we inevitably in this discussion, we're going to go on to a very different set of formats that exist nowadays that never used to exist. At the end, in the old days, school finished at a certain time and then you went home, and maybe it would be the next day, but there would be that period of alleviation or whatever you want to call it, or retreat. And nowadays, in an online culture where everyone is defining themselves and expressing themselves in social, what they call social terms, then it in many ways the bullying is ratcheted up.
Absolutely.
The social media, if you said the making fun of the way a person is, if you're sharing footage of people, you're sharing thoughts about people long after school.
Cyber bullying could be very lethal, very, very dangerous. And kids sometimes get lured into it unconsciously. It's not deliberate. There's pop-ups. There's somebody inviting you into a chat. It seems benign. It seems exciting. It seems appealing. It seems innocent. You're 13 years old. You're 12 years old. You're 11 years old. You're 14 years old. You just want a little excitement. You're bored at night, right? You got nothing to do. And screens have become the substitute for relationships, unfortunately, for so many of us and so many of our families. And there could be some very nasty things happening. And we have to really be able to be so attentive to it and empower our children and talk to our children and listen to our children and educate our children. And by the way, in school, it's so important to be able to give each child the resources, the emotional resilience that they need through an ongoing relationship and that sense of attachment. Who was it, Dr. Siegel, who calls it the 4 S's, right? Every child needs to feel safe and secure and soothed and seen, and have that ability when something happens to be able to have somebody with whom they can feel that comfort level of sharing it. And we also have to address the so-called bullies. In Hebrew, the word for a bully is an alam, right? In Gemara and Talmud, we have an expression called the alam gvar, right? Whoever is more powerful prevails. An alam is a bully, this powerful person where, might makes right. It's not right makes might. It's might makes right. I could, so I do it because I'm more powerful, because I'm stronger. And it's interesting that the word alam is a bully. It's exactly the same letters like the word elam, which means mute, somebody who's mute. Sometimes, I have to tune into the world of the bully. Has he been muted? Has she been muted? And the only way for them to cope with life, to be able to feel their own dignity, to be able to feel good about myself, is by bullying you, by putting you down. There's some need that my bullying is filling, because a child at the core, is not evil, right? Even our Yetzer Haras, our negative inclinations, they're trying to cope like animals. In Tanya, the Yetzer Hara is called the Nefesh HaBahamit. The animal consciousness. The animal is trying to survive. And sometimes I survive by becoming an aggressive bully. And I have to figure out what is the coping mechanism that this child is trying to deal with, that this is what he or she needs. Now, I can't wait till I finish the analysis in order to protect the victim. The victim has to be protected under all costs, because somebody else's trauma doesn't give them a right to bully me and destroy another child. But I'm saying, as educators and mentors, we always want to address first and foremost the child suffering, And we also want to address the child whose suffering is coming on in different ways.
So just by extension of what we were talking about before, not only is bullying a reality that a person feels very much, you know, subpar, and they're not worthy. Not only does it take place nowadays long after the school gates close and people can be on various groups, whatever it is, where it can be continued and perpetuated, but also when there are bullies, that's also a reality. And that's also a reality
Exactly.
that cries out for attention from
Cries
educators,
out, cries
parents.
out is a good way of saying, is this child muted? And his way or her way of finding their fake happiness in life, filling their own void, their own sense of muteness, the fact that I can't express myself. There's nobody to listen to me. What is this child going through in their home, in their brain? That this is the outlet. And I think we have to confront it on both levels. And, thank God, recent years, there's been a lot of research in the world of bullying, different alternative models that have been suggested. And I'm not an expert because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a social worker, I don't have a degree in education, so I have to make all of these disclaimers. I don't speak here as an expert in terms of the research, in terms of the science, in terms of the pedagogy. I speak more from the perspective of Torah and of Judaism, and somebody who deals with a lot of people. But I say all of us, whoever is in a position, all of us are in the position, we're all, we're parents, we're pedagogues, we're educators. I think each and every one of us, it's incumbent upon us to really be able to explore all of the resources that are out there today. And there are different models and there are sometimes disagreements. But what is so important is not to be mute ourselves, not to just be apathetic and turn a blind eye to the reality. Sometimes, and by the way, I should say something else. I just got an email from somebody. He was in shul and he literally watched a father beating his child. He said it literally looked like he was beating him to a pulp, like as though he found a thug or a criminal who was running around with a gun. This was his little kid. I was so hurt. I'm not even going to tell you the reason why he was beating this kid. And he asks me in an email, what was the right thing to do? Should he mix it? This is a father with a child in shul, and I have to say, my instinctive reaction is call the police. Now, is it the right thing to call the police? I would first go over to the father, but of course you should mix in. We're not allowed to stand by idly when the blood of another person is being spilled. What happens if this father has a terrible, terrible rage problem, a terrible anger problem, has his own trauma, has his own dysfunctionality? Maybe he was bullied. Why should his child suffer? This father is accountable. You cannot do this to your child. How many people do I know suffer as adults because their parents were completely insensitive to their emotions and sometimes bullied them? So this is everybody's obligation as a society. We are our brother's keeper. We are our brother's custodian. The words of Cain after he murdered his brother, Hashomer achi anoichi, am I my brother's guardian? That's not the Jewish way. That's the way of the first two brothers, the first brother who killed his other brother. Our way is the words of Yosef, whose brothers did not like him, and yet he said, Es achai anoichi mevakesh, I am searching for my brothers. Yes, when you see a child being mistreated by anybody, speak up.
Well, that's a tremendous responsibility that you've described, and it's one that many of us intuit that if you see something, we should mix in and get involved. But that ability to not turn a blind eye is only going to be as true as me understanding the signs. So you see someone beating his kid up in shul, okay, and you see someone in this, you see in the playground in school, something's going down, okay, at least you're aware of it. But what are signs maybe that parents and educators should be looking for about some of the more insidious or more subtle forms of bullying, particularly, let's say, on social media, or whatever it might be, where the child is being bullied, but there's no outward expression of it. You're not seeing any outpouring of bullying happening. The teachers don't see it in the playground. You don't see the guy beating up someone in school or in public. What are the signs that parents and educators maybe could be looking out for?
That's such an important question, and it's true with each of our children and with each of our students, as parents, as fathers, mothers, grandparents, uncles, aunts, friends, and of course, teachers, educators, therapists, and principals. And I think it's so important to be able to really tune in to all of the aspects of our children's lives, everything, meaning their body language, their demeanor, their facial expressions, their productivity, their creativity, their social habits, changes in their social habits, changes in their academic performance, changes in the way they're dealing with their friends, the way they're dealing with their neighbors, the way they're dealing with their siblings, looking for signs what happens in bed when they go to sleep. What do they talk about? Do they retreat? Do they detach? Do they allow you to touch them? Do they allow you to hug them? Do they allow you to embrace them? When things are calm, it's later at night, you lie down with them in bed, maybe you read a story and you just schmooze nonchalantly, non-formal conversations. Listen to them. See what their imagination, where their imagination is taking them. My point is, be fully, fully alert, be fully, fully attentive. For this, we need to work on ourselves to have the mental space. It's not easy. You know, we're all stressed. We're all anxious. We're all busy. Everybody's working hard. Everybody's trying to make ends meet. And even if you're financially successful, you're still stressed with your financial success. You know, managing your business, managing your money, dealing with all the issues in life. But this is a priority. This is a priority. Just like you make a priority on Shabbos, you take off from work for 24 hours and you shut your phone for 24 hours. You don't check your mail for 24 hours. Just to make a priority in the morning. You take time to daven Shachris and to put on tefillin, even though you're a very busy person. One of the great Hasidic masters says that just like it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin every day, it's a mitzvah to spend and isolate 30 hours every day to focus on the state of our children. This was said by a Rebbe. This was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, who passed away in 1920 in Russia, 1920. But he understood this. A half an hour a day, it's almost a meditation. A half an hour a day that I tune in to what is happening with my children. So somebody once asked me, Rabbi YY, what should I do a half an hour? What? I said, really? In a half an hour? That's enough for you? A half an hour is enough for you to figure out what each child needs? But it just demonstrates the fact, yeah, it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin every day. And it's a mitzvah to spend at least 30 minutes. And what am I doing with 30 minutes? I'm not focusing on anything else. I'm actually tuning into my child. And sometimes if you have many children, I don't know how you can do it in 30 minutes, but I want to listen to my child, I want to speak to my child, I want to think about my child, I want to reflect to my child. A child is a world, a child is a universe. You know, a child is an inner world. A child is not just a machine that performs things. You know, sometimes some of us grew up in classrooms and the focus was, you know, outer performance. Everything should look good. Everybody should be disciplined. Everybody should do exactly what the teacher wants them to do, should do their work. You should walk in, it should be quiet. Now, there is a tremendous beauty to that, and we all crave structure and we want structure, and structure is very good for children. And some children thrive with, I guess most children thrive with structure and so forth. But it's very important not to allow structure to eclipse the pnimius, the neshama, the inner consciousness and the inner soul. I really want to tune into every child and help them thrive and make them feel like a success story. You know, they say the happy child is the obedient child, the child who feels satisfied, the child who feels accomplished. I know a principal in a school, a very dedicated Jew, and, you know, he once heard a teacher said, this child is just a bad child. And this principal said, no, there's no such a thing as bad children. There's such a thing as a bad teacher. Now, I will say, there's not even such a thing as a bad teacher, but there's such a thing as a teacher who was told as a child that he's a bad child, and he became a bad teacher because he was told that he was a bad child. Children are not bad. We need to tune in to what is happening in their inner world, and we want to build them. I want to give them the confidence and the empowerment and the positive reinforcement. We want to notice their light, and we want to help them unleash their creativity and harness their creativity in a beautiful and splendid and productive way. You know, every Jewish child is a Mozart. And the worst thing that could have happened to Mozart is, imagine Mozart growing up without a piano. What would happen to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart if he grew up without a piano? The genius would be there. The creativity would be there. But the outlet, right? A Yiddish neshama is infinite. It's infinitely great and splendid. Every Jewish child is a Mozart. So Torah is the piano of the Jewish child. Torah is really the divine blueprint for life of how do I harness my creativity in the most powerful way. But that Torah needs to be applied and made relevant and exciting for each child. That takes a lot of inner work. Most of the work I have to do with myself, not with my child. I need to approach the child from a place of empowerment and serenity and tranquility and deep, deep belief in the divine, infinite grace and light of this child.
So when I'm looking for signs as an educator, as a parent of a child being bullied, so I'm really not looking for any particular set of signs. I'm looking to be in tune with the child as much as possible so that I'll notice fluctuations. I'll notice changes in behavior, in demeanor, as you said before, body language, whatever it might be.
I think, yeah. And you know what? We have to also confess the truth that sometimes we will not notice. Sometimes there are good parents and good teachers, really sensitive people. And those kids just know how to hide their secrets. And we have to acknowledge that as well, because these kids are brilliant in their coping mechanisms. And sometimes it's too painful for them or too embarrassing for them, or they want to hurt their parents. You know, they feel bad for their parents. I'm not going to put this on my parents. I'll deal with it myself. And it could come out 10, 15 years later. We just have to be aware of that as well. And when that happens, you can't blame yourself because you may have done everything right, but you just didn't know. Sometimes we just don't know. And it's painful. You know, we want to try to do whatever we can, but that's why I always say attachment is the key. Be attached, be attentive, be connected. Tune into your child and have fun with them on their terms, not on your terms. You know, nights in the house should not just be, what did you learn today in school? Repeat what you learned in school. I still don't know a child who answered that question to the satisfaction of the parents. What did I learn today in school? Nothing. I didn't learn. Oh, really? Why am I paying so much tuition? I don't know. I also think you shouldn't pay so much tuition. I'm happy to stay home, right? But we really want to be able to humble ourselves and tune into our child's world, and just they should feel connected and attached. It takes work, especially for some of us, those of us who are more cerebral, those of us who are more busy, those of us who think we're too mature, we're too adult-like, those of us who are very responsible, those of us who have our own anxiety and stress to deal with. But I want to be able to bond with my child on his or her terms. And as my child is growing up, to be able to have conversations with them as much as possible, just about life. Just share, and most importantly, listen. There's a beautiful, beautiful saying from one of the great masters. The Hasidic master's name was the Lechovich Magid, the Magid of Lechovich. And he once said that there's a flood, and God tells Noach, Ba'el Ateva, go into the ark, you and your wife and your children and your children's spouses, your daughters-in-law. And he says the word Teva means an ark, a box. It also means a word. So he said, when there is a flood outside, when there's a flood in the world, you have to take your family and enter into dialogue. Bo'el Ateva. Enter into the world of words, enter into conversation. When there's no flood outside, you can rely on osmosis. You can rely on the chicken soup. You can rely on values, just being bequeathed and communicated organically and unconsciously. But when there's a flood outside, when there's a raging flood that threatens to drown us all, we need to talk. Bo'el Ateva. We need to talk. We need to listen. We need to have conversations. We need to communicate. Fun communication, humorous communication, not necessarily serious and intense. We communicate much better and much deeper, and things go in and penetrate much further when it just comes, naturally out of our heart, and it can go into your heart. It's also important, age appropriate, to talk to your children about sensitive things that in the past we didn't think we have to talk about with our children. Let them grow up. They'll get married, they'll have chassan classes, kala classes, they'll figure it out. Very, very dangerous notion today. And I'll tell you why. Your child may be growing up in the most beautiful, refined home. There's no YouTube and there's no Facebook, perhaps. But you know what? All it takes is one kid in the bunk or one child in the classroom. And there's a classroom of 24 kids. You just need one who visited a cousin last Shabbos or last Friday and was introduced to something. That's all it takes. And he teaches it to the whole bunk. How do I know this? I know it from my own children. When I spoke to one of my children at his bar mitzvah about certain facts of life, he said, Tati, you're a few years too late. Those were the words. He laughed. And I'm like, I thought I'm the größe chacham, I'm the smart guy who knows to talk about things.
Getting in there
He
early.
says, you're a few years too late, years too late. So it's so important today. I don't want my children to get an education about biology and the way Hashem created the world from YouTube. I don't want them to get it from places that are going to project it, bereft from holiness, bereft from meaning, from beauty, from sanctity, from dignity. And then when they're going to identify these symptoms in their own body, they're already depicting themselves in horrible, sinister terms. I want them to know about all the realities of life from God's perspective, from Torah's perspective. I want them to treat their bodies with dignity. I want them to respect their hormones. I want them to respect their transitions from childhood into adulthood. I want them to understand puberty from a Torah perspective. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to be scared of themselves and scared of their sensations and scared of their thoughts and scared of their cravings and scared of their experiences. I want them to understand who they are lechatchila as great human beings, to be able to tackle everything from a place of dignity and empowerment. And that's why fathers and mothers need to, age appropriate, need to really be there for our children to help them usher in their own growth in a way that will be embracing and sensitive and empathetic. And nobody will be able to shock them. Nobody will be able to open them up to a filthy reality that they don't know about, because they have already learned about reality from a very pure and pristine and clean place. Very important today.
Well, you just mentioned twice then I guess what many parents fear is that sometimes these things will go unnoticed, and that's a reality of life. And sometimes you could think you could be, as you said, you can be getting there early and find that you're too late. But in terms of potential prevention of bullying, what can educators and what can parents maybe more intimately do to try to build their children up in a certain way that maybe reduces or mitigates the risk of them getting bullied as life goes on?
I think the most important thing that we can do as parents, and I'm answering this from a place of common sense and my anecdotal knowledge from relationships with people, listening to people, talking to people, and so forth. I think the most important thing we can do is just develop strong emotional relationships with each of our children. Mothers and fathers as important as mothers, and sometimes more important. Each of us throughout their entire youth, from the moment of conception, I say from the moment of conception, you heard that right, throughout pregnancy, throughout birth, we want to be able to be present in their lives in a very real, fun, exciting, intimate, and profoundly connected way. I want my child to be able to feel that his home or her home is a place where they can feel safe. This is a place of safety. This is a place where they can share. This is a place where they will not be mocked at. This is a place where they can express emotions. This is a place where they can cry. It's a place where they can laugh. It's a place where they will be celebrated for who they are, not for who I want them to be and for who they're not. They should feel that this is a place of security. I want them to feel that this is a place where they will be seen for who they are. They will be noticed. Their personality, their soul, their mind, their presence, their body, their gifts, and their challenges, they will be noticed. And I want them to feel that this house is a place where they will be soothed. If they are in pain, they can be vulnerable about it, because they won't be judged. They will be comforted. They will be soothed. They will be listened to. They will be validated. Their presence will be accepted. The more we can do that for our children in their primal years, the more their primary caregivers can offer them this type of attachment, the more hope and likelihood there is that if God forbid, stumbling blocks come up and things happen, never mind dramatic things, they will feel comfortable to share it with us. And you cannot invest in this enough,
So investing time in building a sanctuary that allows them to feel secure at that place, even if there will be times and situations that they feel very insecure, they will have that place of security, and they'll also have you as a parent or whatever it may be, educator.
Exactly. And if I don't know how to do this as a father and a mother, I have to remember two things. If God gave me this child, it means that God felt that I have the resources to be able to be here for this child. It wasn't a mistake. Sometimes a father tells me, I'm Asperger's. I got my own trauma. I got my own anxiety. I just checked out from life. I don't feel. So first of all, the fact that you're aware of this is already a tremendous accomplishment. There's an expression, right? Diagnosing the illness is already half the remedy. So the fact that you know that you have trauma and you know what the trauma is, wow, you're ahead of the game. Amazing. Okay, I commend you. That's number one. And number two, if God gave you this child will help you heal. Your attachment to this child will help not only the child be healthy, it'll help you heal. It'll bring out better and deeper things in you. It'll take you out of your comfort zone. So we sometimes have to challenge ourselves and learn, what does attachment mean? And some of us experience attachment, but it's wounded attachment. Some of us experienced as children anxious attachment. We could never trust fully the attachment. And then when we get married, we go in and we go out and we go in and we go out and we get close and we run away and we get back close and run away again. Some of us have experienced avoidant attachment as children. When there was a difficult emotion, attachment was avoided. You don't want to face it. And as we grow up, we do the same thing. Your spouse tells you something that's sharp or difficult or sensitive, and suddenly, flight. I run away for 3 weeks. It's fight or flight, or I freeze. So all of these, when our children trigger us, it's such a gift for self-awareness. It's such an opportunity for growth. Don't run into self-loathing and don't run into self-pity. Have empathy for your own challenge and then say, and how can I grow from this? How can I learn how to be more attached? And when you remember that your soul is a chelik elikami mal mamish, your soul is a fragment, so to speak, of God. You're a derivative of the consciousness of infinity. You're not small. You're not insignificant. You're not valueless. The trauma is basically an external definition of who you are, completely divorced from your true infinite essence. So when we can do that and have that backdrop and that belief and that conviction, it allows us as parents and educators to heal much more. The most painful thing for what I find for many of us parents and educators is when we lack self-awareness. When we think the issue is our children, when really the issue is not our children, it's our reaction to our children. It's how we're processing our children. It's the fact that I don't believe in myself. I was once speaking at a shul, it was about mitzvah Shabbos. So I said, one of the 10 commandments, the fifth one is kabed es avicha ve'esimecha, respect your father and mother. But I said, I would like to offer a little bit of an alternative translation, and I hope it's not heretical. Kabed es avicha, respect your fatherhood. Respect yourself as a father. Respect the father inside of you. Kabed esimecha, respect your own motherhood. Respect the mother inside of you. I'm not anymore a 4-year-old wounded, traumatized child. I'm a father. I'm a mother. I can do it. I could be a father. I could be a mother. My children need a mother. My children need a father. Can you respect the father and mother inside of you? Can you see that father and mother? Can you rise up to the position and be a father, be a mother? Have that confidence. Be attached. Be connected. Become that solid ground upon which your children can walk on. Remember, you don't need your child to be your best friend, but your child needs you to be their best friend. You don't need your child to compliment you and validate you. If you need compliments and validations, pay a therapist $300 an hour and tell him to compliment you for an hour. If you want, you could call me and I'll compliment you. I'll validate you. I'll do it for free. Find people who will validate you and compliment you and tell you what a great guy you are. No problem. I also like compliments. However, Your child is not here to make you feel good about yourself so that I should have my child feels that I'm their best friend. I feel that my child is my best friend. That's not what he's for. But your child needs to feel that you're their best friend. You are their greatest fan and their greatest supporter. You will be here for them through thick and thin. You will fight for them like a mama bear, like a papa bear. You believe in them. You're crazy about them. You see the world in them. You see God's presence in them. It says about Hashem, one of the most beautiful expressions about the Jewish people. We say it before Pirkei Avos, from the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, chapter 11. God says, each of you is a branch of my plant, my tree, the artwork of my hands with which I feel so proud. You look at your child and you want them to be able to feel what you're feeling. I look at you and I am so proud of you. I feel your tiferes. I feel your splendor. I feel your beauty. It's not just unconditional love. It's unconditional pride. Just like when your child was 1 week old and you looked at them and your heart melted just because he's 14 and she's 16 and they may not be doing everything that you agree with. Okay. But can you still see that glow in their eyes? Can you still see that soul shining? Can you still believe in them so that they could believe in themselves?
Rabbi Jacobson, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you.
And
thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the schus. And may Hakshiva go from strength to strength to be able to become an ear, Hakshiva, an ear that's open and serves as a true empathetic witness to be able to elevate and inspire and empower all of our children.